She told you exactly what turns her on. And every word of it was wrong. Not a lie. Something worse. She believed it when she said it. That's the part that should unsettle you. She wasn't performing. She wasn't protecting herself. She genuinely thought she was telling the truth. Soft connection. Deep emotional understanding. A man who listens. A man who gets it. That's the answer she gave you. That's the answer she gave herself. And it's the surface of something she has never looked directly at. One woman decided to look. Nancy Friday didn't run a survey. She didn't hand out questionnaires in a university hallway. She spent more than 2 decades collecting the private sexual fantasies of ordinary women. Thousands of them. Written anonymously. In their own handwriting. With no researcher in the room. No camera. No pressure to sound enlightened or progressive or safe. Just a blank page and the promise that no one would ever attach their name to what they wrote. What came back didn't just challenge the public narrative about what women desire. It detonated it. The fantasies that poured in were not soft. They were not tidy. They were not what any of these women would have described out loud over coffee. And the most disturbing part wasn't the content. It was the pattern. Nearly all of them, 97%, shared a single psychological structure. Not a scene. Not a character type. A structure. A specific internal architecture that repeated across age, background, education, relationship status. As if something underneath culture, underneath identity, underneath everything a woman has been taught to say about herself, was running the same ancient program on a loop. This is not socialization. This is not trend. This is something evolution stamped into the female nervous system before language existed. Before shame existed. Before anyone told her what wanting was supposed to look like. And here's what changes everything. When that fantasy goes live inside her body, when it activates while she's standing right in front of you, it doesn't stay hidden. It leaks. Her body starts broadcasting. Small movements. Shifts in posture. Changes in her eyes. Gestures she did not choose, cannot rehearse, cannot shut down. Happening below the floor of her own awareness. She doesn't know she's doing it. She can't stop it even if she did. These aren't subtle hints you need a psychology degree to decode. They're involuntary physical confessions. And by the time you reach the end of this, you will know precisely what each one looks like. You will see them in real time. In real conversations. With real women. And the moment you do, something permanent shifts in the way you understand every interaction you've ever had. It's not an act she wants performed on her. It's a psychological weather system she wants to be caught inside. That distinction matters more than anything you've been told about seduction. Because the moment you mistake one for the other, everything you do becomes mechanical. Transactional. Dead on arrival. Justin Lemler runs research at the Kinsey Institute. The place that has spent 70 years studying human sexuality with more rigor than any institution on the planet. He designed the most comprehensive investigation of sexual fantasy ever conducted in America. Over 4,000 participants. Not checkboxes. Not multiple choice. He handed them blank space and asked them to describe, in their own unfiltered language, the fantasy that grips them hardest. The one that shows up uninvited. The one they return to when nothing else works. He expected chaos. A vast sprawling map of desires pointing in every direction. Different women wanting fundamentally different experiences. What he got instead was a template. A repeating signature. The same psychological blueprint appearing again and again in submissions from women who had never met, never spoken, never compared notes. The dominant theme wasn't a physical act. It wasn't a location or a fantasy character. It was a state of being. A specific internal condition most of these women had never once described to another human being. Not to a partner. Not to a therapist. Not to their closest friend. Because every message they've received about desire for the last 50 years has quietly, relentlessly suggested they shouldn't want it. Here's the state. Being selected with such absolute, unshakable certainty that the part of her brain responsible for evaluating, performing, calculating, and protecting goes completely quiet. Not dominated. Not overpowered. Not silenced by force or manipulation. Made irrelevant. Because his decisiveness left nothing for her to figure out. He had already decided. Not tentatively. Not conditionally. Not pending her approval. Decided. Completely. Before she had time to construct the usual defenses. And the force of that certainty created something she almost never experiences in modern interactions with men. Permission. Not permission in the sense of him allowing her something. Permission in the sense of her no longer needing to manage the interaction. To steer it. To protect herself from his hesitation or his need for validation. She could stop performing the role of gatekeeper because there was no gate left to keep. He wasn't asking if he could want her. He already did. And that wanting had a shape. A direction. A weight. Every man she's met in the last 5 years hedged. Softened his desire. Waited for her signal before revealing his own. Treated his attraction like something that needed her authorization before it was allowed to exist. He was different. He skipped that step entirely. Not because he ignored her. Because he knew. And his knowing made the question obsolete. Most people assume attraction is a conscious choice. They think she looks at you, calculates value, weighs pros and cons, and then decides. That narrative is convenient. It gives her agency. It makes her seem rational. But the biology disagrees completely. Helen Fisher dedicated 40 years to mapping the human brain during moments of genuine attraction. She didn't rely on interviews. She used neuroimaging technology inside her labs at Rutgers University. People were hooked up to scanners. She watched their skulls light up while real feelings ignited. No pretending. No memory distortion. Just raw electrical activity recorded as it unfolded. What she found shattered the idea of the rational lover. When real desire activates, the part of the brain responsible for logic is silent. The prefrontal cortex, the CEO of your personality, the judge and jury, sits in the corner doing nothing. The very first region to fire is buried deep. Ancient machinery. It is called the caudate nucleus. This structure powers compulsion. It drives addiction. It pushes animals toward food and mates before reason can intervene. In humans, it means the body casts its vote before the conscious mind even opens the ballot. Her chemistry spikes seconds before she forms a single thought about whether you look good. By the time her logical brain wakes up to evaluate you, the animal brain has already declared you safe. Already decided you are worth pursuing. This explains why so many women describe falling in love as something that struck them. A sudden shift. A weather event rolling in while they were still deciding what to wear. You cannot debate a chemical reaction into silence. You cannot talk someone out of a pulse that skips. Logic tries to override the signal but fails because the command comes from deeper ground. 3 centuries ago, a woman named Ninon de L'Enclos understood this mechanism long before science had tools to measure it. 17th century Paris. Philosopher, essayist, intellectually formidable. She curated relationships with surgical precision. Voltaire wrote that her system of desire was the most elegant ever constructed by a European mind. She kept men wanting her well into her late 60s. Not through tricks. Through presence. In private letters, she explained exactly what triggered her nervous system. It was not power. Not beauty. Eloquence. Those mattered less than anything else. The man who moved her arrived in her presence as though the conclusion was already written. She noted the distinction clearly. Every other suitor asked permission to want her. They sought confirmation. They waited for a green light before expressing interest. One man simply knew she was available and proceeded accordingly. No apology. No checking. Just action. He did not perform his desire. He embodied it. And when that energy hit her, her body reacted before her social defenses could rise. She called it the gaze that knows. Because she knew he knew. And once she recognized that certainty, there was nothing left to protect herself from. Her biology responded to him directly. She was bypassed. The decision had been made before she sat down. The loudest thing her body will ever tell you sounds like silence. Most men miss it completely because they are waiting for confirmation. They are scanning for smiles. For nodding. For verbal agreement. Meanwhile, the real signal already fired and they were looking in the wrong direction. Joe Navarro spent a quarter-century inside the FBI counterintelligence division. His job was not to ask questions. His job was to see what people were not saying. To read, the involuntary leaks the body broadcasts when the conscious mind believes it is in control. In his world, missing a signal could mean a blown operation, a dead asset, a career ending in a concrete room. He cataloged hundreds of nonverbal tells, but one stands above the rest in terms of raw diagnostic power. He called it the freeze response. The name does not capture the weight of what is actually happening. This is not hesitation. This is not uncertainty. This is the nervous system hitting pause on the entire operating system to run a full scan. Here is what it looks like in real time. She is animated, talking, moving her hands, laughing at something. Normal social rhythm. Then for 1 to 2 seconds everything stops. Her hands freeze mid-gesture. Her face goes neutral. Her entire body goes still, like someone pulled the plug on a machine that was humming fine a moment earlier. Then it resumes, usually with more energy than before. Most men register this as a conversational gap, a moment where she zoned out, a brief lull in the flow. They are wrong. Her limbic brain just flagged something significant enough to warrant shutting down non-essential systems and collecting a full environmental report. The freeze evolved as a predator response. Threat detected, movement suspended, senses sharpened, full assessment engaged before any reaction. The neural pathway in modern humans is identical. But the trigger here is not danger. Her brain detected something worth stopping for. Something that required immediate evaluation before the interaction could continue. So it briefly paused the social performance, scanned every input available, visual, auditory, spatial, chemical, and then released the hold. The freeze always comes first. Before the lean. Before the touch. Before the eyes shift. It is the opening line of her body's unspoken script. It is her nervous system saying something just registered. Stand by. Eleanor of Aquitaine ran courts in 12th century France where questions of desire were debated with the seriousness of law. Real arguments. Real verdicts. The most famous ruling addressed a single question. Why does attraction require uncertainty? The court concluded that desire depends on a live, unresolved question. Is he choosing me right now? Not yesterday. Not theoretically. This moment. When the answer becomes locked, performed instead of felt, the chemistry cannot sustain itself. What Eleanor described 700 years before neuroscience was the exact mechanism behind the freeze. The freeze is her body running that assessment live. Is this real? Is he deciding right now? Does this certainty hold? The question fires in her body before her mind can articulate it. And that 1 to 2 second stillness is the sound of her system processing the answer. She was describing her day at work. Complaining about traffic. Talking about a movie she watched last week. Her words pointed one direction. Her body aimed somewhere else entirely. At you. And she had no idea it was happening. This is the signal that once you recognize it becomes impossible to ignore in every interaction you have for the rest of your life. Not the polite lean when you are speaking. That could be manners. That could be performance. Anyone can tilt forward during a story. This is different. This is what her body does when her conscious attention is focused on something completely unrelated to you. Watch what happens while she talks about her weekend plans. While she explains an opinion about politics or describes a conflict with a friend. Her sentences are aimed at the topic. Her torso is aimed at you. Not obviously. Not dramatically. A few degrees of rotation in her shoulders. A subtle shift in the angle of her hips. And her feet, which sit furthest from conscious control and therefore leak the most truth, are pointed directly toward you while her hands gesture toward something else. She did not choose this. She is unaware of it. Her prefrontal cortex is occupied building sentences. Her body, taking orders from older wiring, has quietly repositioned itself toward whatever the deeper brain already selected as worth moving toward. Joe Navarro documented this as the orienting reflex. The body physically rotating toward stimuli it classifies as important or desirable. Involuntary. Impossible to suppress without disrupting the natural flow of her behavior in a way that would itself become obvious. You cannot fake relaxation while consciously controlling your shoulder angle. The effort shows. So the body just does what it wants while the mind is distracted. The most diagnostic version happens when her explicit focus is locked elsewhere. She is laughing at her friend across the table, glancing at her phone, absorbed in a memory she is recounting with full emotional investment. And she is still angled toward you, still oriented, still pointed. Her body voted. She gave it no instruction. It simply moved. Pauline Bonaparte, Napoleon's youngest sister, lived her entire adult life as though her own desire was a legitimate organizing principle. She posed nude for one of the most famous sculptures in European history. She refused to apologize for wanting what she wanted. And every observer who documented her noted the same behavioral signature. She could not aim her body toward something she had decided not to want. When genuine interest was present, her entire physical orientation followed instantly. When it was absent, equally clear. No polite positioning. No social camouflage. The gap between what she wanted and what her body revealed did not exist. Most women maintain that gap. They hold the filter in place. But the body still moves, still turns, still orients. Gravity does not ask permission. Objects do not choose to fall toward mass. They just fall. Her body is falling toward you while her mind talks about something else. That is not strategy. That is physics. Her fingers were already tracing the path she wanted yours to take. She just did not know it yet. And that ignorance is exactly what makes the signal impossible to fake. When the fantasy is running live in her body, when her nervous system has entered the state we have been mapping, she begins touching herself. Not sexually. Not for display. Not in any place your mind reflexively jumps to. She touches her neck, the ridge of her collarbone, the inside of her wrist, sometimes the hollow at the base of her throat where the pulse sits closest to the surface. Joe Navarro classified self-touch broadly as a pacifying behavior. The body calming itself during moments of heightened activation or stress. But he identified a subset that does not fit that description. The touch that is not soothing. Not patting. Not rubbing. Those are anxiety responses. Stress discharge. Nervous energy seeking an outlet. This is something else. The touch that is slow. Trailing. Drifting. With the quality of someone half lost inside an image they have not consciously assembled. When her fingertips move across her own neck with that specific quality, unhurried and almost absent, what you are watching is not self-regulation. It is proxy rehearsal. Her nervous system has been primed by arousal for contact it has not yet received. So it stages a preview against her own skin. She is not thinking about this. Her hand is simply migrating to the place she wants to be touched and performing the gesture she wants done there using the only instrument currently available. Herself. The neuroscience is exact. Under genuine arousal, the somatosensory cortex, the brain region responsible for processing touch, dramatically increases its sensitivity. The skin becomes neurologically hyperalert. Nerve endings at the surface wake up, sharpen, become hungry for input. When the body reaches this heightened state and no external stimulus arrives, it manufactures its own. She is not performing desire for your observation. She is experiencing it. And her hand is following the experience like a needle dragged through a groove. Location is diagnostic. The neck and collarbone are not random targets. These are areas of extreme nerve density. Almost never touched in ordinary social interaction. Overwhelmingly associated with intimacy. The skin there is thin, reactive, wired directly into the cervical nerve network. When she trails her own fingertips slowly across that terrain, she is activating the identical neural pathways that would fire if someone else's hand were doing it. The inner wrist, specifically the pulse point, carries different weight. There is something almost confessional about a woman who touches her own pulse while sitting across from you. She is touching the place where her heartbeat is most accessible from the outside, where the evidence of her internal state presses closest to the surface. She is not concealing anything. She is showing. Without knowing it. The quality of the touch is everything. A quick adjustment of jewelry means nothing. A brisk scratch is nothing. But a slow trailing movement while her gaze softens and turns slightly inward, as though she is listening to something inside herself rather than to you, that is the signal. Her mouth can say anything. Her pupils are under oath. That difference matters more than every verbal cue you have ever been taught to listen for. Eyes are the most researched feature in attraction science. And nearly everything circulating about them in popular culture is either painfully obvious or outright wrong. This is neither. This is what the actual data says when you strip away the motivational garbage and look at the biology. Helen Fisher's neuroimaging work mapped the exact chemical cocktail of genuine attraction at a resolution most people have never examined carefully. When real desire is present, the kind that begins in the caudate nucleus before a single conscious thought has formed, the brain releases a precise combination of dopamine and norepinephrine. Both chemicals produce an immediate measurable effect on one specific muscle in the human body, the dilator pupillae, the muscle that controls how wide the pupil opens. Pupil dilation under genuine desire is involuntary, instantaneous. It cannot be performed on cue. It cannot be consciously suppressed. No amount of social training overrides it. There is no technique that fakes it convincingly. It is a direct, unfiltered printout of the neurochemical event occurring inside her brain. Not her performance of interest. Her biology publishing its findings in real time without her permission. The practical obstacle is context. In dim lighting, pupils are naturally large. In bright light, naturally small. You need a baseline. Observe her pupils early in the interaction when the emotional temperature is neutral. Then check again when something shifts. When the topic changes. When you close physical distance. When you say something and watch it land. If they expand rapidly, noticeably, in a way unconnected to the ambient light, you are watching dopamine and norepinephrine do their work live in front of you. Without her authorization. Without her awareness. Then there is the blink. The average human blinks 15 to 20 times per minute. Involuntary. Mechanical. A visual system reset. A micro absence from the present moment repeated dozens of times every hour without awareness. When genuine attraction is present, blink rate drops. The limbic brain locked onto whatever it has decided is worth attending to suppresses the interruption. Does not want to miss data. She is watching you more carefully than her expression reveals. Processing more than she is letting on. And then the hold. After a blink, instead of the eyes snapping back open and immediately re-engaging, there is a fractional delay at the bottom. Less than a second. The lids stay closed a beat longer than physiology requires. As though closing was a momentary retreat before consciously deciding to return to what she was watching. The gaze that comes back after that held blink has a specific quality. Slightly heavier. Slightly less managed than before. The performance layer has been for one genuine moment disrupted. You will recognize it when it happens. Not because you can predict its exact shape in advance. Because something inside you will register it as different from every other way a person has ever looked at you. That is not interpretation. That is your own limbic system reading hers. You came here to learn how to read her. The real answer is that she has already been reading you. And she is reading the version you cannot fake. Here is the truth buried beneath everything we have covered. These four signals, the freeze, the lean, the touch, the eyes, are not responses to what you did. They are responses to what you are. The micro-freeze does not trigger because you delivered a clever line. It triggers because her brain detected something worth stopping for. Something significant enough to warrant shutting down the social performance and running a full system scan. The gravity lean does not happen because you used a technique correctly. It happens because her body has already determined where it wants to be and moved there without consulting her conscious mind. The self-touch does not activate because you flipped some hidden switch in the conversation. It activates because her nervous system is rehearsing a future it already believes is real. Her pupils do not dilate because you performed presence convincingly enough. They dilate because something genuine is occurring and her chemistry is responding to the real thing, not the imitation. Which means you cannot manufacture these signals. You can only become the kind of man who generates them. And that word, generates, is precisely where most men's understanding collapses. Ninon de L'Enclos, in one of the last letters she ever wrote, described something no modern framework has improved upon. She drew a line between two categories of men. Those who wanted to be desired and those who simply were. The difference, she said, was total and irreversible. The man trying to produce attraction is like water trying to hold a shape. The effort itself is the failure. The man who generates it is something else entirely. He is the shape. He does not produce the response. He is the condition under which the response becomes inevitable. What she was identifying is the gap between the man who reads about these signals and the man who understands why they happen. So here is the thought I will leave standing in the room. If her body reveals the fantasy before her mind authorizes the admission, and it does every single time without exception, then the only real question is what you actually are when no one is performing for. Not the version you assembled for the interaction. The other one. Because that is what the caudate nucleus is scanning. That is what produced the freeze, the lean, the trailing fingers, the held blink. Not your strategy. Not your script. Your presence. And presence is not constructed in a conversation. It is built in the hours no one is watching. In the quality of your attention when nothing is at stake. In the depth of your own inner world when there is no woman in the room to be impressive for. Most men who made it this far will absorb everything here, feel that flicker of recognition, and walk directly back into the same habits. Waiting for permission. Softening their want. Hoping she notices something they have not fully built yet. If something in this landed differently for you, if it did not just inform you but disrupted something, hit subscribe. The next layer goes deeper than the algorithm allows. Unfiltered. Direct. For men who have stopped guessing at a depth they have not yet accessed. You already know if that is you.